Everybody has, you know, a class that they have hated or that was t absolute dog shit. However, I signed up for a class that I would regret for an entire year. This class is called government comparative politics, right? The whole point of the class is to write papers, do presentations, and you choose a country, right? And then at your conclusion, you kind of have to argue that your country is either communist, socialist, capitalist, or fascist, right? Pretty easy, right? And yeah, no, it is easy. It is easy. It is fairly easy. But the amount of bullshit, I mean, the amount of bullshit I have witnessed in the class is unfathomable. Unfathomable! Listen. The class was taught by Mr. Dan and Mr. Jerry. Now, Mr. Dan is a very popular teacher. Everyone loves Mr. Dan. He's a really cool teacher. But the problem is, Mr. Jerry, he's kind of new. He's not really. He's just kind of a new teacher, right? We're like, these can't be too bad, right? First term, yeah, it's fine. It's just kind of a more of a like annoying to do because Mr. Jerry he's not really good at teaching, and Mr. Dan and just ends up being like kind of a observer. So it's like oh, it's not too bad. It's not too bad, right? Like the organization skills are not on point. Like there's no submission pages for things, and it's a little just a little bit what's the word messy, right? The class is just a little bit messy, but it's no problem. It's no problem. All right, we had a few presentations here and there. Actually, the schedule was this: quiz every 2 weeks. We had a quiz and a presentation. So we were on schedule all the time, right? It was fine. And at the end of the term, we had a big presentation and a big paper. First term easy, very. It was easy, but it was very annoying. And then there came term two. Term two was bad, bad. And this is where the bullshit comes into play. So, Mr. Jerry, it was the same. It was the same thing again. Quiz and presentation, right? But this time, like throughout the term, the schedule slowly changed, and Mr. Jerry's teaching style is not for me at all. He tries to be this like chill teacher, but it's very forced. It feels forced, and that just makes me like, ugh. And like it's hard to focus because he's always yapping, and that's not really my kind of style, right? Which it's hard to you know listen. And then like he said, oh, we're gonna change the schedule, and then 2 weeks went by, and then he just suddenly announced that, oh, there's a presentation tomorrow. We didn't know about this. We didn't know about this, and so we wanted it changed, and we were able to change it. In that term, this happened 3 more times. Not to mention, a lot of us were late on assignments because there was no submission page for things, right? So due dates were hard to know, hard to find out for papers and other smaller assignments. Because the teachers were so like you couldn't find like if you forget when something is due, you have to ask the teacher. I have to ask the teacher himself. And if you couldn't, well, too bad because there's no way to find out. The some like when it's due. So also the rubrics, yeah, that too. So the teachers will have slides, right? Like a 100-page slide that you will go through every week. And for some reason, he will put the presentation and the paper rubric in there. For some odd fucking reason. It will put. And then. like, eventually he moved the paper rubric, but the presentation rubric barely changed. So when we wanted to find out how to do the presentation, we had to go through hundreds of pages of the slides that are also inconveniently placed in the Google Classroom. So that was a huge little annoyance, right? And then at the end of the term, we had our paper. I wrote my paper. I submitted it a day late because I had a little something, right? Not a problem. Not a problem. I waited for feedback, and after a week, I didn't get it. Now, at this point, it was finals week. So I'm like, okay, dude, can you hurry this up? And it was like, oh, sure, you get feedback tomorrow. I didn't get feedback until the term was done. After finals, I got my feedback, and I got an F on my grade. Now, I don't get Fs unless it's math class. I don't fail these things. I never fail classes. So obviously I have to complain, like, dude, this is unfair. You didn't give me time to redo my essay, right? Like, this is unfair. And he was like, okay, let me think about this. Let me go over this with the principal. Bitch! Yeah, so that was a little bit of a minor inconvenience. And then at the whole winter break, I was scared to my shivers. I was shivering my timbers because I didn't want to take another history class. And then I started the term, right? I was like, okay, I need to go talk to him, right? And he went up to me first and was like, you can have a redo of your paper. You have a week to do it. I'm like, thank you. And I got a 95 on it. Amazing, right? Well, that's not the end of it. At the end of this, now we had term 3, which is the last term. Whew, this was a tough one because all of a sudden we had a new teacher, which was the owner of the school. Now he was in a different school. Like we had multiple multiple schools, right, of the same place, and oof. He was like on it was on the kind of online class and so we would have all these lagging issues all the time. And look, he's a good teacher, I'll admit that, but he just doesn't work for me, right? And a lot of people agreed. He's like he can teach, just not. It's only for a very specific amount of people. And then the same thing happened again with the presentations. They would announce presentation 3 days before, and we would have no idea about it. I'm like, oh my god. Everyone's like complaining. Like, and then like, same with the papers, man. The same thing happened. He's like, all of a sudden, we didn't have a rubric, and you're like, okay, let's do tomorrow. I'm like, dude, you never told us anything about the paper. Usually, if you have a paper, you would announce it in the beginning of the term at least. At least. But no. They just, oh my god. This is horrible. Uh, and then we rushed our paper because apparently we couldn't just. They would refuse to let us have some time to do it. So, God have mercy. And then it was in the term. Look, finals went swiftly. Finals was really easy. I got a 94 on the finals, and paper it was fine. But the amount of bullshit we went through in the entire term was unacceptable. And at the end of the term, we'll have these class sign-up sheets, right? And then the amount of people who are signing up for government class next term or next year was insane. I was able to convince 10 people to not take government class, but that wasn't enough. Apparently, it's gonna change. Like they're gonna change the system of government class. But still, what a disaster that class was. But there's a lot more things I didn't talk about because some other people went through some unfair stuff too. Yeah, that was the worst class I've ever taken, and I don't know what force drove me to not drop the class in the first place. Thank you for listening to my rant.